Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good day and welcome to the show. Today is Thursday, the 4th of February, 2021. Now, I'm going to take a few minutes. I'm going to try to explain to you guys what's happening out there. In 2008, we had a crisis within the financial system. Most of you guys on my channel out there are very familiar with this. And, that's when instead of letting the system filter out all that leverage, they started a program of building much more leverage, and they reinflated the system with quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, Operation Twist. But they weren't really doing. Uh, uh, it was almost like sterilized rather than unsterilized injections of money into the system. And it wasn't really it wasn't really fiscal stimulus. It was more monetary policy. Now what's happened is we've embarked upon a new era of uh, of stimulus. It is a different kind of stimulus that goes into the economy, where they're sending directly paychecks in the mail to people, you know. And now they're going to enter into even a newer phase of this, where they're going to be supporting all of the many millions of people who have lost jobs and stuff. They have to. They have no other choice. You can't have 30 million people starving on the streets of America. And under this new policies and this new administration that's in place, it's only going to move in one direction now at this point. So ahead of everybody else, I've been predicting a economic recovery over the past number of months. Now, an awful lot of these guys out there are saying, hey, the stock market's going to go down by 80%. It's going to go down by 70%. I held my ground in this, and we haven't seen this rather large decline in the stock market over the last number of months. But we're starting now to see the seeds of this economic recovery coming that I was talking about for the last number of months. In other words, I'm ahead of the game. I'm also ahead of the game on something else. This is going to lead to a crisis unparalleled in American history, but it's not coming for a little while yet. Uh, Probably sometime in 2022 or possibly even 2023. And I'm going to explain to you why this is going to happen in this show, and I'm going to try to. It's something that's kind of difficult to explain because there's so many twists and turns in it, but an awful lot of it has to do with confidence. Confidence in the fiat currencies. If you guys don't know what fiat currency is, it means that it's money that's not really doesn't have any underlying value other than the stamp of approval by the government. The government says this has value, and so it has value because the government says it has value. And this is what the fiat currencies are. Back in 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard. And that's when the petrodollar was born. They switched from a gold standard to giving the dollar value because it was the only thing that you could use to buy oil with. Okay? They started a process in place where the dollar's demise was written in stone. Nixon said this is only going to be a temporary measure. The absence of convertibility to gold. Turned out it wasn't a temporary measure. That was a lie. And it's become a permanent. Well, the problem is all these other currencies around the world are all connected to the dollar. This is where they obtain their value. And the dollar's connected now to nothing since 1971 until now. And like I said a few minutes ago, this is all actually a confidence game. Where we're at in this story, which is a long story right now at this moment, is there's still quite a bit of confidence in the dollar as being the de facto world reserve currency, and the fact that every country on earth has to use the dollar means that the dollar has a people need it for countries need it. They need it to pay off their debts. Uh, there's a euro dollar and all of that trade that's going on. And the dollar is the de facto world reserve currency. It's so big. It's such an enormous powerhouse around the world that when you have things like this, generally it takes a long time. Things are very slow and it's this large. Almost like a mountain covered with snow, and it's been building up snow and building up snow. And sometimes it takes a lot longer for the avalanche to actually occur than you would expect because it's so big, it's so large. Like when the Titanic was sinking. A lot of people on the Titanic didn't even know the Titanic was sinking because it's such a big ship. It took so long to sink. Even though it had the fatal wound and it was filling up with water. Well, this is a similar situation. This is sinking. But over the last period since 2008 until now, what's been happening is there's a moderate amount, or even some would argue quite a large amount of deflation out there, where the economy is actually sinking, and this has increased much fold since COVID came along, where the economy's sinking out there, businesses are going out of business, and there's a lack of money in the system right now because of something called a liquidity trap. Now, I know I'm kind of going from one thing to another, and I don't want to confuse you guys, but there's so many elements to this coming in place from different angles, But really what it all amounts to is confidence. And right now there's a divided opinion amongst investors and amongst the people in general that is there going to be deflation? Is the stock market going to fall by 80%? Is there going to be a lack of dollars out there and prices are going to fall on things like gold, silver, cryptocurrencies? And this is a big question mark a lot of people have. And am I good to actually hold dollars during a period of deflation like this? There's a large majority of the people out there, not a majority, but it's a large group that believe that the system's going to actually deflate, and the smart thing to do, like if you listen to certain economists like Harry Dent, the smart thing to do right now would not be to hold gold, silver, would be to go in for dollars and hold treasuries and sit on the side with dollars. That's one consensus of opinion out there. And this is helping to support the system so that confidence maintains within the system because enough people believe that that's the way this is going to go. And then there's the other ones out there who can see the inflation starting to occur, and they're out there hoarding Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and they're out there and they're into silver and gold and everything because they believe that the currencies are going to lose value rather rapidly at a certain point in time. And their cryptocurrencies, gold and silver, are going to go astronomically high. And that they're going to make a lot of money. So who's right about all this? Well, to me, it doesn't really matter who's right or who's wrong. And I'm going to say who I think's right later in this show. But to me, I see this division in opinion out there. And it's divided like 50-50. People don't know which way to turn right now at this point because they don't know which direction this is going to go in. So some people out there are thinking, well, I'm going to hedge my bets in every different direction. I'm going to have treasuries. I'm going to have cash on hand. I'm going to also have gold. I'm going to have silver. I'm going to have cryptocurrencies because I'm worried about protecting my financial future. There's a lot of people thinking that way, because they don't know which way this is going to go. And they would like to know which way this is going to go absolutely, because if they knew absolutely, then they could hedge their bets in the proper direction. In other words, if they knew it was going to be inflation, they'd say, hey, I'm going to get rid of these dollars and treasuries right now, and I'm just going to go all in for Bitcoin, gold, silver, if they knew for sure. And the opposing side of that is, if they knew for sure it was going to be deflation, they'd say, hey, I'm going to go all in dollars, all in treasuries, and the heck with the gold, silver, and Bitcoin. I'll scoop some of that up later when it's cheaper. So we have this division in opinion out there. Well, this is helping to support the dollar right now. The fact that public consensus out there right now is divided because they don't know which way it's going to go. I'll tell you what's happening. This economic recovery is starting. The first seeds of it that I've been talking about for months now. I said, it's coming, guys. It's coming. The economic recovery. And the first seeds of it are starting. Like factory orders are up. Certain things are starting to go up a little bit. And the virus is starting to creep back, which is exactly what I expected. Millions of people out there getting the vaccination right now. And in fact, this morning, I heard that more people now have been vaccinated than the number of people who have probably had the virus. I mean, those numbers are starting to cross each other right now, right at this moment. The amount of people who've had the virus and the amount of people who have had the shot. And the shot is going to go up a lot quicker, the number of people who have had the shot, rather than the people who've had the virus. And what this leads to, ultimately, is the virus shrinking back. The virus was one of the biggest things that caused this economic malaise that we've been in for the last number of months, and with all the jobless losses and everything else, And the banks, what the banks did is they hauled back. They, even though they had their reserve requirements lowered, so in other words, and there's a huge pool of money out there that's been put out there from all these stimulus packages and everything else. There's more money floating around in the system, in the upper parts of the economic system than's been forever, maybe. So the pool of money for the banks to lend from is absolutely astronomical. But because of this crisis and the economy shrinking back, well, you have banks out there who are they don't really want to lend. They want, if they're going to lend, they want to make sure the person has absolutely perfect credentials and that they're going to get their money back right now. So lending standards are tight right now during this crisis. But I see changes in the wind. And I'm ahead of it right now, trying to tell you guys what's going to happen with these changes. And what I see is the banking, when the banks start to see the economy starting to pick up and jobs start being created, because I think we're at the lowest point right now in this crisis as the virus starts to shrink back. A lot of places and businesses across America and everything closed, strip malls and everything else. When the economy starts to improve, banks are going to start to lend again, because they're going to see this too. They're going to see these green shoots. And that's how banks make money. You ever seen come on there and the bank will say, we got record profits this year. How? I mean, how do they have record profits? They're paying all of their employees, their tellers and everything. They're paying for their buildings. They're paying for everything else. Where's that money coming from that gives them record profits? Loans that they're making. Because they create money when they make a loan. And how do they create that money is very simple. They just make a book entry. They just write down a number on a piece of paper. Well, now they don't even write on a piece of paper. They just type it into the computer. You go into the bank, you say, I want a big loan, and they say, sure. Most people in their minds picture that the bank has that money and they're going to give it to me. I'm going to go into the vault, get the cash or whatever, and they have that money on hand. They don't have any money. They just type a bunch of numbers in the computer. You want to borrow $100,000? Sure. They type in a 1, 0, 0, 0, and so on. And it's made. The money's made. Now you owe it back to them with interest. Great deal if you can do it. But here's the catch for the banks. and this is why they just don't lend money willy-nilly to anybody, is once they write that book entry in, and they've created that loan, and they've lent you that money, now they're responsible for getting that money back, because now that that money's in their books, like the 100,000 you just borrowed, if you don't pay it back, now the bank suddenly is $100,000 in debt. That's called a non-performing loan. They get too many non-performing loans, and they'll need to be bailed out by the government. Now, they can bail in. The banks can bail in, but they don't generally do that because there's a huge outcry when they try to actually just go in and take your money out of your account because there's a bail-in. They tried it years ago in a place called Cyprus, and it outraged the people. You know, and so they know, and it also makes the bank look really bad if they do a bail-in. So they do what's called a bailout, where the government just goes ahead and lends them the money they need to cover all of their non-performing loans. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here a little bit. This economic recovery that's starting to come, and we see green shoots for, the banks are probably going, their lending standards are very high right now. They're probably going to start to lower their lending standards in order to make loans so that they can make profits again. Because this is how the banks make profits. As that new money starts to flow out into the system from a whole bunch of new loans, and I mean, I could just give you an example of how that might happen is maybe there's a restaurant on the corner that closed. The old owners couldn't keep up with this crisis that's just occurred, you know, and they've closed the restaurant and sent their employees home and everything. Well, some investor might drive by and he might say, you know, he might live in the area and he might say, you know, I'm going to reopen a restaurant there. So he go into the bank and take out a loan. Well, this will create a whole bunch of new jobs. Not only do they have to hire in all of the people that were unemployed, you know, that they might actually put an ad out and new people might come in, you know, but before they open up, they'll probably do a big renovation or whatever. So then the contractors are brought in too. It gives them work. This economy can fire up so quick because money is what drives it. It can fire up so quick again because now there's all this new money within the system from all these big, you remember the big stimulus packages and everything? Back around March 2020, you know, $3.2 trillion, and then 900 billion more toward the end of this year, and now another $1.9 trillion more on top of that, probably coming very soon to a neighborhood near you with $1,400 checks. Remember all that? That's still in the system. It just hasn't made its way through to the banking part of the system, which uses that money with leverage of at least 10 to 1. So if you're talking like 1.9 trillion here and 3.2 trillion there and another 900 billion there, you know, and then you start leveraging that up 10 times, you know, lots of money starts to flow into the system coming this summer. And you'd be surprised how quick new jobs can start to become available, so these people will start to go back to work during this economic recovery. But what will happen with that is a lot of this money that's been sit on the sidelines in this what's called a liquidity trap, and this is this money that all this new money that they generated has mostly went into a liquidity trap because they just can't give it out willy-nilly. It's held within the banking system, an awful lot of it. And within the rich people have it. It starts to get spread around more. And the velocity of money starts to pick up. I'm expecting this to happen sometime around midsummer. So then we start to go into recovery and everything feels good. Probably by next Christmas, we're going to have a nice Christmas. A lot of people are going to be back working again and everything else, you know? But what I'm warning you guys about is the compounding inflation that's going to start to come. It's going to start to creep into the system. And how this consensus of opinion You remember I told you earlier in this talk about how there's a large group of people out there who think it's going to be deflation, and there's a large group out there who think it's going to be inflation? Well, this recovery this summer, leading into this fall, is going to they're going to change their minds because they're going to see prices and consumer inflation start to obviously go up and increase exponentially. And they're going to start to say, hey, you know what? It is going to be inflation. Even the diehard guys out there, and they didn't see the stock market big crash, and they didn't see, and now what they're seeing is prices going up rather quickly. They're going to start to quickly change their mind, and what we're going to see is money's going to start to really flow into gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies, because they're going to see that that's the direction it's going. And what that's going to do is it's going to start a chain reaction. The people out there, once that consensus and once that difference of opinion is gone and everybody knows, hey, this is going to be inflation, once that becomes clearly obvious, then confidence is going to start to be lost in the purchasing power of the fiat currencies. And then a mass exodus is going to occur, where especially Bitcoin, do not underestimate the power of the Bitcoin. Each individual Bitcoin can be divided into many. I mean, right now they're dividing a Bitcoin into 99 million Satoshis. But they can extend that decimal point out, and they can make it billions and trillions of Satoshis. Just one Bitcoin. One Bitcoin could absorb all of the world's wealth if you extend the decimal point out to infinity. So do not underestimate Bitcoin's ability to absorb fiat money. And when it absorbs fiat money, what it does, the Bitcoin becomes purchasing power goes up. What you can buy with one Bitcoin goes up. We've already seen that effect. Because, go back 10 years ago. How much could you buy with one Bitcoin? Well, one guy spent 7,000 Bitcoins for one pizza. Now, a Bitcoin's worth about, $36,000? How much can you buy with a Bitcoin now? One Bitcoin. Well, you could practically buy yourself a trailer and put it on a lot. Or you could buy yourself maybe two brand new cars with one Bitcoin now at this point. So Bitcoin, that's the direction it's traveling in. Its purchasing power is increasing more and more. And then we have gold and silver, which are doing exactly the same thing. Well, once the consensus swings and everybody knows it's going to be inflation, then you're going to see an exponential increase in the amount of people who realize that that's the way it's going, and they can see it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You see the Bitcoin and the gold and the silver going up and up and up, and you see your purchasing power going down and down and down. Well, people aren't stupid. And so the money's going to start to flow in, and the value that's represented by the money is going to start to flow into these alternative assets to the dollar, which have infinity is how high they can go in their purchasing power. When you consider that all of the value of everything, your labor, your house, your car, everything you own, all of that represents value. That's not going to cease to exist. So, I mean, if you've got a piece of farmland, or you've got a house, and you've got a car, and you've got everything, the value that's represented there is not going to cease to exist. That value is measured in the dollar, or in whatever currency. If you're in Britain, it's measured in the pound. Here in Canada, it's Canadian dollar. It doesn't matter what country you're in. That value is represented in the fiat currencies. Because this problem is intrinsic to the fiat currencies, that's where the value is going to come out. It's like a balloon that's leaking air. Well, that air is going into the Bitcoin and into the gold and into the silver. So your value is escaping, and it's going into these asset classes that are going in the opposite direction. So once that confidence is lost in the fiat currencies, it's going to be replaced in the alternatives, gold, silver, cryptos. The confidence is going to be in them. And what this leads to is a max exodus. So when the hyperinflation comes, probably in 2022, sometime in 2022, this effect is going to be increased many times over. And so basically, I guess what I'm telling you guys is, yes, you could become rich if you're holding these alternatives to the dollar, gold, silver, Bitcoin, but at a huge cost. And because what's going to happen is as the value and the purchasing power starts to go up on these, and as the purchasing power of the fiat currencies is going in the opposite direction down, it's going to go faster and faster and faster. And the more money that they print, the more money Bitcoin's going to absorb. And the more money gold's going to absorb, and the more money silver's going to absorb. And so that means they have to even print more and more. Because it's either that or everybody out there starves, or there's a huge... I can't begin to express to you guys the problems that this can generate when confidence is lost. So what is your world going to look like? Yes, you might get rich with your gold coins or your silver coins or your bitcoins or your or all of your cryptocurrency assets, and because you've been smart. But what's your world going to look like? Because the world's going to start to crumble because it all runs on fiat currencies. And this transition that's coming, probably in 2022, is going to affect everything in the world and every way the business is done. And so if it happens quickly, it's going to disrupt parts of the system. If this transference or this transfer happens, in other words, if too many people get scared and they all rush out and try to buy into these alternatives to the dollar and dump their fiat, they're going to increase the speed which this moves. It reminds me of when two magnets come together, you know. When the magnets are still 6 inches apart and there's only a tiny little bit of pull, they go slowly together. But as they come together closer and closer and closer, the closer that they come, the faster it moves. This is how exponentials work. And this whole thing is working on an exponential. So its tendency is to go fast at the very end. And that's the big problem, is that speed. Because if this transfer of wealth out of the fiat currencies and into these what's right now very small asset classes like gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies, if this happens too quickly, well, the system will start to break down. Because you're transferring wealth out of corporations, you're transferring wealth out of, and you're handing that wealth to the people who have had the smartness to put away these assets for themselves. If this happens too fast, the system could shudder and stall. Or we could see something very similar to what we've seen happen in Venezuela, you know, but on a global basis. All of this is potentially very scary when I think about it. What could happen in 2022. And so on my channel now, what I'm doing is I'm observing the speed in which all of this is processing along. I'm trying to stay on top of this situation for you guys out there, you know. And I'm also, you know, staying on top of it as it comes day by day as we move toward this. But right now I see it probably 2022 or 2023. The mass consensus of everybody out there is it's going to be inflation. Oh my God, I got to get myself into something that's going in the opposite direction of the dollar. And this means people taking money out of the bank and trying to buy into these alternative asset classes, and it could be very difficult at that point in time to obtain them. I mean, right now you can still get them easy enough. Not silver so much, but we see that in silver, guys. You see how suddenly it can become hard to obtain something? Well, can you imagine when the consensus turns and everybody knows it's going to be inflation and everybody starts to panic and tries to get into these alternative asset classes like a mad rush for the door? How hard it might be to get gold and silver at that point in time? Impossible to get it. And it's no use to buy the SLV or GLD at that point in time because they're just going to settle in paper. And if you're all into the stock market at that point in time, it's settled in paper too. Everything's settled in paper. And if that paper is becoming totally worthless at an alarming rate of speed, the people who have had the foresight to buy into cryptos and gold and silver will be sitting back with a big smile on their face. And already they're starting to get a little bit of a grin. Because look, I've been preaching this for a long time on my channel, guys, about gold, silver, and cryptos. And when you guys first started buying in, the price was a lot lower than it is now. You're already getting a little bit of a smile on your face, but you've never seen nothing like what's coming. I'm telling you. This is going to be, this is the big one. This is the tidal wave. And right now, what we're actually seeing is before the tidal wave comes, people out walking on the beach, all of a sudden they see all the water go away. Oh, this is great, Martha. Let's get out there and pick up some beach shells. Look, there's a pretty one way out there, about 100 yards out. Why is all the water gone? And they're out there picking shells, and they don't look over their shoulder behind them, but there's this huge, huge tidal wave coming. That's where it is right now. And you're buying your little bits of Bitcoin or whatever, like you're picking up your shells, but there's a tidal wave coming. And in that surge, our world's going to change. And I mean, there's no stopping this. This is written into the cards now at this point. And maybe it can cushion it for you personally and for your family if you start to take a look at these alternative asset classes. So I don't care who you are out there right now. I mean, you might be some old lady out there who goes out every week and buys her lottery tickets. Say she buys $50 worth of tickets every week, hoping she's going to win the lotto. Well, I'll tell you what, you'd be an awful lot better off if you would instead take that money, because you're never going to win that damn lottery. No way, you can't win them. You can't beat the lottery. Only very few people ever beat the lottery. Your chances of beating the lottery is the same chances of you walking out of the superstore and getting hit by lightning. It just probably ain't ever going to happen. But that money really could, that $50 a week or whatever, really could give you a nest egg in these alternative asset classes now while you can still get them. Because on the other side of that tidal wave, that's going to be the real value. And so what's the government's going to do? Because you can't go without currency. You got to have something to facilitate trade and commerce. Well, it's obvious to me, at that point in time when all of their fiat currencies go into worthlessness, that's when they're going to do a reset. And they're going to, maybe they're stupid enough to try to release a new fiat currency, but it'll go to zero too. Unless it's backed by something. So what they're going to have to do, they're going to be forced to do it, kicking and screaming. They're going to go and they're going to do it. They're going to have to do it. Is they're going to have to make a backing behind their new currency. They're going to have to back it. And they don't have a lot of choices. Because at that point in time, there's only going to be these asset classes like gold, silver, cryptocurrencies that have the value of everything. They're going to have to back it with that. So then there's going to be a mad rush by the central banks and stuff to get a backing for their fiat currencies. And they're going to have to use whatever they have available at the time. And they might have a lot more than they're telling us. In fact, the central banks a lot of them might already own Bitcoin. They already have gold. They already have silver. They're going to have to use it to back the currencies. And so these new currencies that they back, if they're backed with gold, silver, or cryptocurrencies, They're going to have a good purchasing power. You'll be able to buy a lot with them, and they'll be used to facilitate commerce and trade. But you try to get yourself some at that point in time, and there's only going to be two ways you're going to be able to get some. Either trade something that you have that has value, like gold, silver, or cryptocurrencies, or farmland, or maybe you have some real estate or something that has some real tangible value behind it, or work for it. And believe me, you're going to have to work long and hard if you're going to want any amount of the new currency that's backed by gold or silver or cryptocurrencies. So, I mean, you can do this a hard way, or you guys can do this the easy way. And the easy way is to buy into these alternatives right now while they're still obtainable, before we go through this mess where everything gets straightened out again. What happened was in 1971, Nixon really threw a wrench in the entire monetary system, and it's taken all this time to explode the gears and the workings of the machine. And now what's going to have to be done is the gears and workings are going to have to be stripped out of the machine. New gears and workings are going to have to be put back in. In other words, going back to a solid monetary system that has fundamentals behind it. And then they're going to have to restart the machine again. You know? So anyway, I hope you guys get a little bit better understanding of what's coming down the pike in this next year or so. It's going to be very exciting, but it's also interesting times. Very interesting. There's going to be winners and there's going to be losers out there. And keep your heads up, guys, and have a great day, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.